The following program sponsored by Adams Financial Concepts.
About money, a different approach to investing you won't hear anywhere else. Your host, Mike Adams, is a registered investment advisor and works with investment portfolios exceeding over $100,000 in net worth, and has a proven track record of managing long-term investments surpassing the markets in the long term. The information shared on the following program is for educational purposes only, and any investment advice given may not be suitable for all investors. And now, here's Mike.
So it is time to talk about money. I've got a great guest today, got a great interview coming up. You want to hear what he has to say? I've got a lot to cover today, but I wanted to start just kind of ad-libbing, because if you were just listening to the radio and heard the interview on Bloomberg Radio with the CEO of Continental Resources, he was saying, if it's America first, oil prices have to go up. Well, let's think about that. 2 years ago, the CEO of General Motors and the head of OPEC, the Saudi minister that was head of OPEC, said they weren't worried at all about electric cars, that their estimate was that by 2040, there would be fewer than 1% of all cars sold that were electric. By 2040, less than 1%. And with a billion cars sold, that was almost nothing for them. You also heard the announcement, if you've been listening to the radio, that Daimler is investing $1 billion in their plant in Alabama to make an all-electric SUV Mercedes. The world has changed. You know, Volvo's announced they're going all electric. The Tesla is on the road and is second only to Mercedes in terms of luxury cars. They're coming with their small car. They're beginning to produce that. Ford has announced that they intend to make electric cars. 25% of their production by 2020 will be electric. The internal combustion engine is dying. And so putting America first to make oil prices go up, if you're removing that demand, that does not make oil prices go up. I just, for what it's worth, it's my opinion. Everybody has an opinion. They're like belly buttons, But I would guess that if you're head of Continental Resources, you're really hoping that oil prices go up. But if you're an investor, you have to be extremely, extremely cautious. And later in the program, we're going to be talking about some of the other commodities and what's going on in the world, because prices on commodities are up, but it's probably a very artificial kind of thing. We've got that coming up later in the program. But first, I want to talk about the markets, because the markets are doing very well. We've been hitting highs in the Dow. When I used to talk about Dow 100,000 back 7 years ago, and the market was just recovering, had been down to 6,600 on the Dow. Dow 10,000 seemed like 100,000 seemed like a long way away. At 22, 23,000, it doesn't seem quite so far. Still seems a ways away. But the markets are doing well. And so the reason is why? Well, let me tell you. Revenues are increasing, profits are increasing, and cash is all those are reaching record levels. Companies are doing well in the United States, and not just in the United States. Worldwide, companies are doing well. And as companies grow, the value of their stock increases. The actual value and the prices increase. And yet, it's not an equal game where everything increases exactly the same. But what we're seeing is an economy that's been on an up movement since 2008. It's really been on a positive roll. We recovered from the Great Recession. We're on a roll upward. In many ways, in the past years, I've compared this period of time to 1982 to 2000. That was a time, 1982, in August of 1982, the Dow hit 1,000 for the fourth time. People expected it was going to roll over and go down. Instead, it kept going up, and by 2000, it reached 10,000. But what we're seeing today is the turnover of companies as well. 1966, I talked about the blue chips. The Dow included companies like Anaconda Copper, American Can, American Tobacco, Bethlehem Steel, Chrysler, General Foods, Goodyear, Johns Manville, Owens, Illinois, Swift and Company, Sears, Texas Corporation, Union Carbide, U.S. Steel, Westinghouse Electric, Woolworth. Have you ever seen a Woolworth? You know, you have to be pretty old to have seen a Woolworth. Those companies have faded away, and they've been replaced by companies, many in the Dow, that did not exist in 1966. Think about it. Microsoft, Intel, Southwest Bell, Home Depot, Walmart. McDonald's came public in 1966. Costco, Starbucks, Genentech, Amgen, Qualcomm, Cisco. You can go down the list, Salesforce.com, all those companies, the Facebooks, the FANG stocks, Facebook, Apple, Google, Netflix. You know, those stocks have come into being since that time, and we're seeing the change. That change is happening more rapidly. So as you look back and see, that is what's propelling the market upward, and it's going to continue to propel the market upward. You know, the biggest worries now are not that we're going to have a deleveraging of the Fed, but that we do something government-wise which will slow the world down. You know, if you listen to what Donald Trump had to say at the United Nations, and he talked about America first, there was a time when that was crucial. There was a time when the American GDP was over 40% of world GDP. Today it's less than 24%. Today the rest of the world is catching up to us and putting the other countries first and putting us last. Puts us at a risk of moving backwards. You know, one of the first things that the president did was to suspend TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership. You know who stepped into our place? China. You know, the idea was to negotiate with each one of the 12 countries separately. Have you heard of any negotiations going on for any of those 12 countries? No. We've started to talk about NAFTA. The threat is to do away with NAFTA. And negotiations are going on, but you know, the easy things are getting resolved. The difficult things are off the table. They're not moving very fast. The risk is a trade war. And we know from past history what happens with trade wars is that it doesn't just help America, it hurts exports, it hurts imports. It tends to be inflationary because it increases the price of imports, and it tends to depress exports. It's a risk that exist. But other than that, so you say maybe you can diversify and move into non-U.S. stocks. You know that I have a problem with that. Some of it goes back to when I started my career. I began when I finished my MBA. I was at Carnegie Mellon and I was recruited to a company called Intaco Aluminum Company. It was up in Ferndale. It was the second largest smelter in the world. And it was half French owned. And I was an up-and-comer. They had me in the French system. They sent my wife and I, very shortly after we were married, to a little town of Saint-Jean-de-Maurienne in the Alps of France. Now, in the aluminum industry, two people invented the process or came across the process at approximately the same time. Hall came across it in the U.S., and he went to the Mellons and got a $25,000 fund to start the Aluminum Company of America, which we know now as Alcoa. And Hérault developed the process in France and built a company called Pétionnet. And it was Pétionnet that owned half of Intaco. They were the ones that sent me to France. And I got to see some things in France, which has given me a lot of insight into what goes on in the rest of the world. In France, the educational system, you begin in the educational system at about the same age we do, at 5 or 6 years old. And you go through the system, and at 12 years old, there's a break. Those who do poorly in school move into the trades. And so you'll see kids that are 12 years old riding on a garbage truck or sweeping up hair in a hair salon or working at a cheese store. Those are kids who didn't make it in school, and they're being trained. They'll continue to go to school, but they are actually going to be in the trades. Now, if you turn 18, if you pass that and you move on and you get to 18, there's what's called the back. It's the big test. It's going to determine where you go to college or if you go to college. Now, if you don't go to college, you go to work for an aluminum smelter, for example. You go to work as a general worker. You can become a foreman. You can become a general foreman. And then there's a glass ceiling. And no one that starts out as a worker ever is promoted beyond a glass ceiling. Now, that doesn't happen in America, but it does happen in France. And if you go to a school, if you go to one of the top 3 schools, which are considered Polytechnique, École de Mines, and Centrale, in that order, if you go to those schools and you graduate in the bottom 3/4 of your class, you parachute back into those companies. And everybody above a certain level is called an engineer because all those are engineering schools. You parachute back into those companies and you start from there and you work your way up almost to top management. You know, that's where I was branded. That's where I was. So I was one of those that was dropped into there and increased. So eventually I would become a plant superintendent. But that's where you go. Now, if you graduate in the top 1/4 of the class, well, we're coming to commercial break. You got to hear where those people go to work because it will have an impact on foreign investments. Don't go away.
About Money with Mike Adams will resume in a moment on Business Radio 1300 KKOL. For more information, click on adamsfinancialconcepts.com.
Did you know the 20-year annualized S&P return was 8.19%, while the 20-year annualized return for the average equity mutual fund investor was just 4.67%? That's a gap of 3.52%. It doesn't sound like much now, but it could mean the difference between retiring in comfort and running out of money. For some seniors, a gap that large could cost them hundreds of thousands of dollars and cut their retirement short. Don't run out of money. Call Mike Adams of Adams Financial Concepts today, 206-903-1019, and learn more about how you can, 1, create wealth for retirement, and 2, protect yourself from running out of money. Adams Financial Concepts specializes in creating and maintaining wealth. Call today, 206-903-1019, or log on to adamsfinancialconcepts.com. That's adamsfinancialconcepts.com.
We're back with more about money. For details on what you hear on today's show, visit adamsfinancialconcepts.com. Now, here again is Mike Adams.
So I've been talking about my experience in France and the experience with the educational system. So, and kids start out at the same age. At 12, there's the first break, and those kids that are going to be in the trades are separated out. Then at 18, there's a second break, and those kids that are not going to go to college move into factories and production and the other areas, retail. The kids that go to the very top schools, Polytechnique, École de Mines, and Centrale, the bottom 3/4 parachute into those companies at an engineer, superintendent, assistant superintendent, general manager type job, and they work their way up to almost top management. But then there's another glass ceiling. Now, if you graduate in the top 1/4 of your class, you go to work for the government for 20 years. And after 20 years or 25 years, you parachute into top management of companies. So the impact of that, you know, even most Americans that work internationally don't understand what's going on. They see all these people from the same schools, but they really don't appreciate what has happened in the whole system. And it's not just in France. It's in the UK, it's in Russia, it's throughout Europe that this is the system that operates that way. And my Japanese friends tell me it's the same in Japan as well, probably in China. It's the way that the system operates when you've been around for centuries. And so the very top people in the companies have worked for the government for 20 years. They're friends. They know all the people in government. So with patient A in the late 80s, as we were going through that recession, the government decided, because there was going to be a deficit, that what they would do is they would nationalize patient A and credit lyonnaise and all these large companies, French companies. And the shareholders got left out in the cold. They didn't get anything. Then, so patient A becomes a government-owned entity, like credit lyonnaise, like a number of companies. Now you come to the dot-com bust and everything's going down and you have a slowdown in the economy and the government's worried about deficits again. So what do? You want to raise money? You sell stock to the individuals. So Patient A, which was privatized in the 80s, now becomes a public company. The shareholders in the 80s got nothing, and the people who invest in 2000 now have a company that they bought from the government. That's the way it worked. It's very subtle. It's very subtle in terms of how it works internationally, but that is a matter of fact. It was in France. It was in UK. That's how it is internationally, and most people don't appreciate it. Even analysts that go overseas don't really see that. So that idea of diversification on an international basis is, in my opinion, something that needs to be avoided. Now, there's a large brokerage firm, Goldman, who in 2001 produced a report based on based on a fairly limited amount of data, but it seemed to catch hold of investment advice. They identified 4 countries with exceptional growth prospects: Brazil, Russia, India, and China. They called it the BRIC countries. You've heard the names, the BRIC countries. And it was an idea that caught on. It seemed to be rational and logical that if your economy is growing at 7 or 8 or 9 or 10%, that the stock market should be doing much better. And so the whole focus was to spread your portfolio across these international investments and buy companies. And because we knew less about them, you needed to buy the mutual fund. You needed to buy it from the Goldmans, from the Merrills, from the Morgan Stanleys. You needed to buy their mutual funds. And of course, pay their trading costs, paying their analysts, pay all those funds. You got to think about what their agenda was. The question is, was it really true? The fact is, their data was based on a short amount of time, 10 years. 10 years seems like a long time to us in our lifetime, but in terms of a country or an economy, it's a very short blip. I say it's the law of small numbers. If you flip a coin and you flip a coin 4 times, it's going to come out heads 1 out of every 16 times you do it. The first time it comes out heads 1 out of 2, second time 1 out of 4, third time 1 out of 8, the fourth time 1 out of 16. But if you flip that coin 1,000,000 times, you're not going to very often have 1,000,000 heads. Normally you're going to be really close to 50%. It was interesting because following that up, Credit Suisse First Boston did a study of 83 countries that they looked at the data from 1972 to 2009, and they ranked those countries by GDP for the periods of the previous 5 years. So they grouped them in 5-year increments. And if you invested in the highest growth companies, in the highest growth economies, if you invested in that stock market, your return over that time, and it was a very good time for investing because people were discovering international, people were driving up prices. If you invested in the highest growth companies, you would have gotten an 18.4% return, which is a really nice return. But if you invested in the slowest growth companies, your return would have been 25.1%. The BRIC concept was one that sounded logical and reasonable. But even what we've seen in our economy with a slow growth economy, people say 2% is slow growth and things are coming to an end and the sky is falling. The fact is, we've gone from 6,600 to 23,000 on the Dow. I believe there's a better opportunity for finding domestic companies that have international exposure than there is for investing overseas. But opinions are like belly buttons. Everybody has one. So I want to introduce my guest today. My guest has a story to tell, and you'll want to hear it. Mike Rosen of PRR. Welcome to the program, Mike.
Thanks, Mike. Really happy to be here.
So why don't we start with your background?
I have been in communications and persuasion all my professional life. I have a very long background in broadcast television in all elements, from doing documentaries, working in news, producing commercials. My longest career activity has been with PRR, doing marketing, and we'll talk more about that, I'm sure. And I've also spent some time doing nonprofit management and helping to run small performing arts organizations.
Let's go back and talk a little bit more about the TV broadcasting.
You bet.
All one place? Several places?
About 6 different stations in the Midwest, and also worked in Green Bay. I'll mention right next to the Packers playing field, practice field. But most recently it was at Cairo TV. I was the head of their documentary unit, and then I've done a number of documentaries and some work with Como TV as well.
So you've seen the promotion from both sides of
Yes.
the table.
Absolutely.
So PRR, tell us about PRR.
You bet. We are an integrated communications firm, and I'll explain what that means in a minute. We help private companies and public companies, so private companies like Starbucks and Nike and Philips Sonicare, public companies like EPA and CDC, a lot of local and regional clients across the spectrum. And we provide integrated communications, so we provide market research. We believe people can make good decisions if they have good information. We provide public involvement, so when big public activities or infrastructure changes are going on, or land use planning, we're the people who hold the public meetings. We make sure that the public receives information that they can use and respond to, and that the policymakers hear what the public has to say so that they can make decisions based on that. We also do public affairs, which means we help inform policymakers so that they can make good decisions. And we do marketing, which is paid advertising, social media, public relations, branding, partnership development, strategic planning. And we are a visual species, so we also have a creative studio. So we have a suite of designers who do print types of design, but a lot of digital and websites, video production, and with all the different platforms we have, you now need to be able to design graphically for all of those. So those are our services. And then our big sectors are health, transportation, and the environment.
So you mentioned a lot of large companies, but a lot of our listeners are small business owners. So I assume that you also have activities which affect them and services which would be for them.
Absolutely. And I was very much enjoying your reflections at the beginning of the show, because basically everything you were talking about change and managing change and sort of anticipating and responding to change. And that's sort of where we live. Nobody ever calls up and says, Rosen, can you make tomorrow look just like today? 100% of our business is exactly that, is helping businesses make changes. So we start with the same questions, whether you are a 2-person shop or a Fortune 500 shop. What is success to you? And then we define it. How will you know you're there? And then we break it down into, who are you trying to reach? Who are the people you need to reach to get you to that destination? What are the barriers stopping them from doing what you want them to do? And, then working into what are the kinds of benefits we can help you identify that are strong enough to overcome those? Where do we talk to them? In what way? And with these kinds of tools that we offer.
I want to go back to what you said first when you said define success.
Right.
Because I think a lot of businesses tend to think, I need to do advertising, so I need to go out and do radio. I need to do social media. And they begin to think about what they need to do instead of really defining success. Do you find that the case?
It's true. And when we have those first meetings with people and we say, we're going to spend this amount of time talking about your objectives and your goals and your metrics, and then this amount talking about sort of the strategies and tactics, they will almost always say, oh, I know what success looks like. I know what I want. And then you'll get in the room with them and they'll define success of, I want more, right? Well, more can be more dollars. It can be more profit. If you're a surgeon, not all your surgeries are equal, or your profits are equal. It can, and they will frequently go to I want new, right? So if you are in any kind of business person, hopefully
Hold that thought, because we're
Holding it.
coming commercial break. Don't go away. We're right in the middle of a thought. You gotta hear what has to be said. We'll be right back after commercial break.
More About Money coming up with Mike Adams on Business Radio 1300 KKOL. For more information, click on adamsfinancialconcepts.com.
Creating and maintaining wealth has been the specialty of Adams Financial Concepts for over 20 years. Every portfolio managed by Adams Financial Concepts is customized to fit each particular client's objectives and risk tolerance. The client's interest always comes first in portfolio decisions. Call Mike Adams today at 206-903-1019 or log on to adamsfinancialconcepts.com to check out their AFC performance. They welcome your review. That's adamsfinancialconcepts.com.
Now we return to About Money. There's more information waiting for you at adamsfinancialconcepts.com. Here again is your host, Mike Adams.
So I'm here with Mike Rosen of PRR. We just started talking about defining success, companies coming to them, defining success. And let's go back and repeat what we said and go forward.
You bet. What can frequently happen, so the first question is, what is success? The second is, how will you know you're there? What will you count? So a person could say, I want more customers, and end up with less money because the nature of what product do you want to sell or what is your highest margin, or you could alienate everybody who you just had as a customer in the interest of getting more in or what you choose to offer them. So you have to be careful because you might get what you ask for and not what you want. So it's really important to be specific. And frequently we will say to a client, don't spend a dime on us until you put your house in order, because sometimes they have fatal flaws to what the market is telling them that they want, and paying people like us to get customers in the door and then give them a bad experience, which they will then tell other people, turning that no into a yes is really hard. And there is science that says you can get it right 70% of the time and still end up with a negative reputation because people will exchange bad information before they exchange good information. So our advice is usually put your house in order, don't screw it up with your current customers, try to get them to spend more, look for your customers who are shopping somewhere else and figure out how to get them to shop from you, what are the big differentiators, and then think about sort of growing the pie to a bigger pie.
We see sometimes a number of technology companies who come on, and it starts with 2 people, and then it's 7, and then it's 30, then it's 70, and then they're faced the question of laying off people because their growth has been so fast, they haven't really been in control of what's going on. They didn't get their house in order. So as they go through that process, and do you help define that process for them?
We do, both in terms of helping them position their product and the benefits of their product, as well as the differentiators of their product. But then there's also the relationship that becomes so important in the experience that the customer has. So identifying every touch point. There is science that says people will pay more for goods. People will pay more for a bad product that costs more if the service is good. Service trumps both price and quality. So it is really important as well in technology. You know, it's not only I have to learn about this product, so how easy was that? Then the shopping experience, how easy was that and how successful was that? Then the buying experience, how easy and successful was that? Then there's the using and learning part of it. If I have a problem with it, how good were you with helping me through it? So each of those elements can be, you know, shining moments or very, very sad moments. And so we work with people not only in terms of how to you make your product stand out or your service or your retail environment, but then the customer experience and identifying every touch point that a client might have, because that will identify their relationship. And ultimately that is how your brand is determined, is by every single touch point that somebody has.
So I'm sure you have some examples of people that you've helped.
Sure. Let me use on a behavior standpoint, our goal, this was in the Northwest, oil leaks in cars, for example, cause a tremendous amount of bad water quality. And the objective was, how do we how do we fix that, and how do we get people to get their cars checked? And no offense to auto mechanics, but they don't have the greatest of brand reputations. So we had to overcome that as a barrier, and also in effect drive business to them, because there aren't a lot of do-it-yourselfers, or if there are, they know how to check for their oil. So in that case, we tried to create an incentive, right? What's the benefit for people? And then create a sense of urgency. How do I get you to do it now? And cut through the 3,000 to 5,000 messages that people are doing today. So in that case, we built a partnership with the auto industry and said, we want to drive business to you, get people to have their oil checked. We'd like you to give them a discount that they could never get, or free, for this check. And then they will have a great experience with you, which will then bring them back and bring brand loyalty to you. We get to get 7,000 people to get a free oil check, and of those, identify 2,500 cars that actually had leaks and repair them. Everybody won, right? The environment won, the business won, and the consumer won. And that's, in effect, how we try to approach each problem, right? People buy benefits, they don't buy features. So in each of the challenges that we go after, we look for that benefit. And people who understand business, it's a need-based sell, whether you're changing a behavior or selling a product.
So let's talk about the features and benefits. You mentioned that. We hear that all the time, but let's...
Yeah, so let me give you an example. If you come in and are looking for a vacuum cleaner, and I'm the sales guy, you walk up, say, I want to buy a vacuum cleaner. I walk right over to a vacuum and I say, this is an amazing vacuum. It has a 15 horsepower engine, it has 15 attachments, and it comes in 17 different colors. And probably all you're hearing is blah, 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 will it pick up my dog hair, right? So what you need to do is listen for we all solve problems. What's in it for me? As consumers, all I care about is what's in it for me. So it's our job, whether you're talking to somebody about changing a behavior or selling a service or selling a product, is finding out the problem that person has. Tell me what kind of a vacuum you need. What is the challenges that you have? Because it might be about their blinds and have nothing to do with anything else. So by talking to them and identifying the needs, then you can say, this thing will pick up the dog hair. Let me tell you how. And then the features become proof of performance for the benefit. But it's the benefit that people buy.
So, but you have the issue is when you have a salesman, a one person on person, you can do that and identify it. But the problem is when you're trying to pass that message out to a lot of people, not on a personal basis.
So
that's PRR, right?
Well, it is. And it becomes about consistent, identifying that benefit and then utilizing every tool that you have in the toolbox to carry that message. And ultimately, you don't want to pay for any of that, right? Because you want people being your ambassadors. And there is, lots of science about that as well, that we make pretty much every decision influenced by friend to friend, face to face. So that's why you got to get it right, because people will tell people bad stories more than good stories. In fact, there's science that says you can get it right 70% of the time and still end up with a negative reputation, because we tell bad stories more than good stories. So whether you're using advertising and selling that benefit, public relations through the media and telling that story, face-to-face telling that story, and hopefully, using social media, virtually every platform, right? And then the hope is to do such a good job at it that other people, when they say, hey, I'm looking for a vacuum, they're going to say, this is what you need, and let me tell you why. And you want to talk to this person, and let me tell you why.
Right. So how would somebody contact you? And
I will give you my direct number, 206-462-6362.
And what about your website?
www.prrbiz.com, prrbiz.com.
And give me again a very short synopsis of what you do.
We do market research, public involvement, public affairs, marketing, advertising, social media, digital media, websites, and branding. And we do that for primarily transportation, the environment, and health.
So you, the listener, have heard the story. And again, the website is?
prrbiz.com.
And the phone number?
My personal phone number, 206-462-6362.
Call or check. Thanks for being on the program.
Thanks for having me. I really enjoyed it.
So I started talking about the Bloomberg story and the oil. Understanding what's going on and thinking about where we are today. And I think to understand what's going on in the world, one of the best places to look is China. China gets a lot of press, a lot of things going on. When you think about China 40 years ago, it was primarily an agricultural society. Today, it's the second largest economy in the world, second only to us, and it's growing faster than we are. So what happened to make this economy grow so fast? And to understand it and the implications, I think there's a really good example. You know, I lived in France, and so a lot of what I say is France. But if you go back to France, during the time of Louis XIV, he began reigning in 1661, coming out of a number of wars, had a high deficit. Things were really bad. It was like having the Great Depression, recession combined. And they were very, very close to bankruptcy. They'd had 3 major wars, 2 minor wars, and they needed cash. And normally, in those days, you didn't have paper money. You had to have gold or silver or some sort of specie to trade. And France didn't have gold mines or silver mines. So what they needed was a trade surplus. So what Louis XIV did, Louis XIV, I call him, Louis XIV, went out and brought in Jean-Baptiste Colbert in 1665 to be his treasury secretary. And Colbert then instituted a whole program which was to change France into an industrial society or an economic society in a very short period of time. He focused a lot of industry. French industry had been mostly on small crafts. They were backwards. They couldn't compete worldwide. He wanted to bring in industries like glass and textiles, and he did that. And to do that, he restricted competitive imports. He was ruthless and determined, and we're coming to a commercial break. So you want to hear the rest of the story when I come back, because it does apply, and you'll find a huge parallel between what he did and what China has done to fix their economy in such a short time. So don't go away. We've got a lot to do. If you miss part of the program, you can pick it up on the website, on the podcast. If you've heard some of the others, if you missed some of the other programs, they're already on the website and on YouTube. Don't go away. We'll be right back.
Stay tuned. About Money returns in a moment with Mike Adams here on Business Radio 1300 KKOL. For more information, click on adamsfinancialconcepts.com.
How do you picture retirement? House on the beach, small farm in the country, traveling the world with your spouse. The one thing you don't picture is running out of money. Retirement dreams are shattered all too often by poor investment choices, sending many retirees back to work. If you think the job market is tough now, try entering it after you've retired. Don't run out of money. Start planning now. Call Mike Adams of Adams Financial Concepts today at 206-903-1019 and learn more about how you can create wealth for retirement and probably, most importantly, protect yourself from running out of money. Adams Financial Concepts specializes in creating and maintaining wealth. Call today, 206-903-1019, or log on to adamsfinancialconcepts.com. That's adamsfinancialconcepts.com.
About Money continues. Remember the website adamsfinancialconcepts.com. Here's Mike.
So I started talking about what's going on in the world. And you know, if you've listened to the program, that I believe that history doesn't repeat, but that it rhymes. And I think there's lessons to be learned. And I started talking about Louis XIV, Louis XIV, bringing in Jean-Baptiste Colbert to build France into an economic power, which he would do from a backward country as they were at that time, almost in bankruptcy. Colbert went to work and he began to poach craftsmen and entrepreneurs from other countries. They offered him highly attractive incentives, offering many what they called the royal privilege. They didn't have to pay any taxes. The state would finance their business. They guaranteed government orders for their products, so they had no worries. They just needed to bring their business to France. That was a guarantee. They went out and they sent spies to England and to Italy and to all those countries to find the craftsmen and to steal their technology. They stole secrets of production machinery and processes and technology. The first English steam engines were shipped to France. They built factories from a country that at one time had small crafts that were kind of backwards and didn't sell much. Colbert began to build factories with over 1,000 workers, something that was brand new in France, brand new almost in the world. He paid minimum wages, put people into dormitories. They worked 14 to 16 hours a day. The only days off they had were religious holidays. They worked 7 days a week except for religious holidays. And Colbert got into a big controversy with the church because he thought the church had too many religious holidays. He wanted the people to work. They had at that time, France had a large rural population, high unemployment. He encouraged all the women to get married as soon as they could so they could have children and increase the population. And he wanted to bring those people in and not leave. If you left France, you ended up being arrested, sometimes executed, sometimes working in the galley of the king's ships. There was a huge penalty if you left France. Once you were in, you were in. There was no change. 15,000 small entrepreneurs were executed for the crime of importing goods that could be manufactured in France. 15,000 executed because products that were made in France, they imported something instead. You know, it wasn't just manufacturing because the Dutch dominated international trade. So Colbert wanted to construct a merchant navy. And part of that was filling in some of the swamps in the area we now know as Bordeaux and growing oak trees, which became barrels eventually, and planting vineyards, which we now know as the Bordeaux region, because Burgundy was controlled by the church, by the Catholic Church. And Colbert wanted the wine industry of his own. He was nasty, he was hated outside of France and hated by a lot of people inside of France. But he launched France on a large-scale industrialization. We call it mercantilism. And that is essentially the pattern that China chose to build their own country. You know, the ruling Communist Party controls the land. They control most of the economy. They control the military. They own the banks. They can finance who they want. They control foreign policy. They decide whatever is of major importance. And while they adopted some capitalistic practices, they never give up control. With the ownership of the banks, they determine who gets the loan. They can channel the money to the industries where they feel that is the most important. They have no legal restrictions on what they build, where they build, and how they build it. And all the development is not accidental. It's a long-term development program, which brings us to what's happening today. Because if you look at what happened, China during the time of Mao wanted and had a program to dominate, or not to dominate, but to do as much steel as Britain. Today, it does more steel than all the other countries in the world combined. They do more aluminum than all the other countries combined. They do more coal than all the other countries combined. That was a planned program. But they overbuilt. The capacity was huge. And I've talked about on the program last couple of years about what that meant in terms of prices. Steel prices dropped. Britain, during the Brexit time, had problems because they were shutting down steel mills in Britain and laying people off because China was supporting steel prices or steel mills and dumping steel onto the market. That changed this last year. China decided they're going to shut down capacity. They're going to reduce the capacity by 20% or 25%. And suddenly, commodity prices have shot up. Steel prices are up, aluminum prices are up, coal prices are up. They are artificially driving prices up. There's a benefit to the companies who manufacture or mine or otherwise deal with those commodities because their prices are up. But it's an artificial reduction of demand. It's a reduction of supply. It's artificial, and what they decided to do last year, they could reverse overnight. And so as China goes right now in the commodities world is how the world goes. They control the production of steel, they control the production of aluminum, they control the production of copper, they control the production of coal. I started the program with talking about continental resources and the oil price. They also have a significant impact on oil prices. That's where things are. It's not just OPEC that controls oil prices anymore. China has a major impact on commodity prices. And, as we move forward, there's a risk in being invested in those markets because China can reverse course just as quickly a year from now as they did a year ago. And when they drove down prices by floating too much capacity, then drove up prices by taking capacity off the market, they can turn around and crush companies as well. China, you have to admit, they did a tremendous job in building an agricultural society into the second biggest economy in the world. But they can have a significant impact. Their impact can be in the commodities market greater than the impact the United States can have. It's just to be aware of. Investors are the eventual culprit or the eventual victim of this whole thing. It's best to know what's going on in the world and where your money is best placed. That wraps it up for today. We've had a lot of things to cover. There's so many other things that I should have covered and could have covered. That just has to wait until next week. We've got a lot more to cover. There's a lot of things going on in the world. There's a lot of things going on in this country. And there's a lot of great investments to do. If you missed any of this program, you can find it on our website. You'll find it on YouTube. And you can follow us on Twitter. It's About Money. At About Money. Or you can follow us and like us on Facebook, About Money. So do all those things. And until next week, have a very good weekend and a great week. I'll be back with more about money next week.
You've been listening to About Money with Mike Adams, a registered investment advisor. If you'd like more information about what you heard today, or about Mike's investment philosophy and strategy, or if you want Mike to evaluate your own portfolio, click on adamsfinancialconcepts.com. That's adamsfinancialconcepts.com. The information shared on the preceding program was for educational purposes only, and any investment advice given may not be suitable for all investors. Join us again for more About Money with Mike Adams here on Business Radio 1300 KKOL.
The preceding program was sponsored by Adams Financial Concepts. Creating and maintaining wealth has been the specialty of Adams Financial Concepts for over 20 years. Every portfolio managed by Adams Financial Concepts is customized to fit each particular client's objectives and risk tolerance. The client's interest always comes first in portfolio decisions. Call Mike Adams today at 206-903-1019 or log on to adamsfinancialconcepts.com to check out their AFC performance. They welcome your review.